Design thinking is a powerful approach for solving complex human centered problems. Its first stage, empathize, is potentially the most important, yet in practice, it's often the most neglected. In engineering classroom, students tend to treat it as a formality. They do very superficial interviews, create little emotional connection with users, and move on. This compromises everything that follows, and it limits the quality of the solution they develop. This raises a key question. Can an immersive virtual reality experience really deepen students' empathy during the empathize stage? And if so, does that translate into better design work? Our research investigates the use of virtual reality as a preparatory tool for the empathize stage in design thinking education. The literature supports this direction. Research shows that VR can foster empathy by allowing users to experience the perspective of others in a more situated way. Experiences that include physical constraints usually create stronger emotional engagement than passive visual experience. This connects to concept of embodiment and Proteus effects, the idea that temporarily inhabiting a different bodily condition can meaningfully shift our attitudes and perceptions. Building on this idea, we integrated the VR experience into an engineering design course to investigate its role during the empathize stage. The intervention was embedded in a project based engineering course at INSPER in São Paulo. The semester's guide in question asked students to design solutions for people with motor limitations, and the VR experience was implemented right at the beginning of the empathize stage, before students began their fieldwork. The goal was not just emotional impact. It was to see whether that impact translated into deeper problem framing and more user-centered design solution through the semester. Our intervention used the Mystery G application, a mixed reality tool that simulates the experience of a wheelchair user navigating a supermarket. What makes it distinctive is the combination of a VR headset with a real physical wheelchair coupling bodily action with the virtual environment. Participants had to navigate aisles, read items on shelves, and place them in a shopping cart, all while managing the physical constraints of a wheelchair. The experience lasted about 15 minutes, but it was enough to generate real discomfort, frustration, and reflection. The experience was physically demanding. We observed moments of genuine frustration, students repositioning multiple times to reach a product, or dropping virtual items and feeling embarrassed picking them up. Some involuntarily used their legs to compensate, a movement not available to a real wheelchair user. One participant, however, consciously crossed their legs through the simulation to avoid exactly that. That act of deliberate self-regulation is a powerful signal of empathy engagement. Participants on words capture what scales alone cannot. One student reflected on how physically heavy it felt. Another, who had never used a wheelchair or VR before, said that simply trying to read items on shelf was enough to make them realize how limiting everyday life can be for a wheelchair user. These are not abstract reflection. They are affective response triggered by embodied experience. The study involved engineering students across two semesters, a control group and an experimental group. 12.5 completed the simulation and formed the focus of this preliminary analysis. The intervention group was predominantly male and about half had no prior VR experience, making this a genuine first encounter with immersive technology for many participants. We measure empathy at four time points using two complementary instruments, the iOS scale, which captures perceived closeness to other, and the IRI, a multidimensional self-report measure of empathic traits. We also assessed the sense of presence with the SUS questionnaire and complemented the data with interview and observations. Data collection followed for moments across the semester, before the course, before and after the VR experiment, and at the end of the term. This allowed us to track both immediately and long-term effects of the intervention. The iOS results tells a clear story. Immediately after the VR experience, perceived impact closeness to wheelchair user jumped significantly from a mean of 5.13 before the experiment to 6.33 right after. This difference was statistically significant. By the end of the semester, score remained higher than baseline, through the peak effect attenuated. The IRR told a more modest story. No statistically significant changes were found in any subscale. The greatest variation appeared in fantasy and personal distress, dimensions more connected to imaginative projections and emotional reactivity, with a small to moderate effect size, suggesting the intervention had a stronger impact on perceived relational proximity than on stable impact traits. However, we found a meaningful correlation. Students who felt more present in their simulation also showed higher absolute empathy level after the experience. The effects extended beyond scales and surveys. 5 project groups developed designed proposals directly inspired by situations they experienced in the simulation. 2 focused on reachability solutions for shelves. 3 proposed cart or basket attachments for wheelchairs. The immersive experience shaped not just how students felt, but how they framed their design problems. So, virtual reality shows strong potential as a super tool for the empathize stage in design thinking. The results shows that VR can quickly increase the feeling of connection with user, influence how students define design problems, and encourage reflection about accessibility during the semester. Its impact on deeper empathy traits was smaller and not statistically significant, which is expected in a short intervention. Still, the sense of presence created by immersion was clearly connected to higher empathy levels after the experience. Therefore, VR should not replace human contact, but work as a catalyst that helps students better understand users and improve the design process. These results are part of larger study and will be published in future.